Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. Now, with the Morning Magazine, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's show on AM 1320 and streaming live at WFHR.com. We also welcome our friends from RCC Media. We're here digitally recording this for viewing on their website or on your cable channel, your public access cable channel, depending on the system that you have. You can check your local cable listings, and the reason they're here, in part one of today's show, it's time for a Wood County update with Wood County Board Chairman Lance Pliml. Good morning, sir.
Good. Thanks for having me, Carl. So you read the weather forecast. Am I going to be able to go to the Rafters game tonight?
Well, we'll see.
It's
good. Yeah, it's 50-50. I was there last night. In fact, I had some fun up having reversed roles. I was Cooper's guest up in the booth during the game last night. That was fun.
Hopefully the weather will hold.
Yes, it was. And the Rafters got a nice win against the Lakeshore, and hopefully they can sweep them because then they go on a big road trip. We wanted to start off. I got this news release yesterday. And it was a notification to the public regarding upcoming closures of Red Sands Beach, Southwood County Park for the purpose of the aqua skiers, team practices, shows, state and world tournament. And obviously, a lot of this is as a result of what happened at their practice site in Buren. So why don't you speak to this, sir, and give us a little backdrop and what Wood County is doing to try and help.
Well, thanks, Carl. This is a situation we've been dealing with for a number of years. We anticipated that the aqua skier site up in Buren would have been a park by now. We had a relocation plan of County U, but because of various court proceedings, that has not occurred yet. A couple of weeks ago, we had a very bad accident up there. A young man was struck by a car, and the driver wasn't doing anything wrong, traveling about 15 miles an hour through an area where cones had been set up. It was just an accident that occurred because of the mixed use and the crowds we have up there. The crowds are a result of good things happening in the economy. Anchor Bay is up there. They continue to draw great crowds. We have a boat launch up there where cars have to back in off of the county trunk highway down the ramp, and those trailers park there, and there's just a lot of congestion. Out at Lake Wazeecha, we have a world-class water ski facility in sight, and I think that's been exemplified by the fact that we host the state water ski show tournament every year, which is the largest water ski tournament in the year. In the United States. And because of the success there and because of the site, we have been chosen this year to host the World Tournament, which is a real feather in our cap. And that's not just a feather in the cap of the park system. It certainly is attributed to the work and the efforts of the aqua skiers, the hundreds of volunteers and thousands of volunteer hours. And then the one thing I hear as I travel around, it's the people in Wisconsin Rapids. They just say they love coming up here because the people are real friendly. So we have this great site out there. We didn't see a conflict of interest. And let me make this real clear. The lake is not closed,
right?
Other than for the state and world tournament, just on those couple of days. The lake is open. The beach at 5:30 will start to be shut down so they can practice and then have shows on Wednesday and Sunday night. That will not occur. Those closures are not on Friday, Saturday, and it doesn't close on Sunday until late in the afternoon when virtually all the campers are gone and there's very little conflict. We're going to take a look at this throughout the year and see if this is something that we would permanently do, but at least we have a trial basis going. So we did it in the interest of A, public safety first, 2, economic development. The aqua skiers have brought great, I don't want to use the term really notoriety,
Okay.
but certainly awareness of the facilities that we have in this town. And every time we bring those thousands of people into town, the spectators, the participants, it contributes to our economy. Therefore, we saw this, the committee saw this as a very positive move, and we're happy to partner in this respect. Personally, one of the things that I see all the time is we often have facilities, and too often as government entities or individual authority, we say no. Mm-hmm. We have young adults every day that tell me there's nothing to do in town. Well, there's something to do in town, and we want to make sure that we help facilitate that and not get in the way. So the decision was made to allow them to practice out there on those evenings.
Okay, yeah, there's quite a bit going on. I think we need to make people aware of that. And we have beautiful facilities in this area. For instance, hey, last night I was at the Rafters game, and there was on a Tuesday night close to 1,400 people, and a lot of those folks, I think, came from the Marshfield. It was a dairy night type theme, and it was all those people coming into town to watch the Rafters game. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah, and out at the park, Lake Wazicha and the park out there is a fantastic facility.
It is gorgeous.
And that beach area is very lightly used after that time. But keep in mind, if you're a local resident and you want to swim out there, White Sand Beach is also available.
It is.
And is an excellent facility. And then people swim around the lake in various areas also.
Okay, but again, just be aware of what. And again, the lake isn't being closed, but we're just helping the aqua skiers so that they can get ready to host what's going to be a big year, as I think 50th anniversary for the
50th anniversary for the aqua skiers
for that state tournament, and then you got the world coming to Wood County.
Yeah, pretty nice feather in our cap.
Yeah, well, that gets into since we're talking about infrastructure. Last time I had State Representative Krug here, and he kind of took the governor and some of his own fellow Republican lawmakers from down in southern Wisconsin to task for something you and I have talked about, and that has to do with infrastructure, with funding for infrastructure. And like, hey, this isn't Milwaukee. This isn't Madison. It's time to start spending some attention to the rural areas of the state of Wisconsin, and it's time to come up and start thinking out of the box when it comes to funding for transportation in the future. You've been spending this past year representing the counties and county boards across the state of Wisconsin. Is there any consensus coming up locally about this? Representative Krug talked about like an additional small tax that counties could levy toward infrastructure as possible alternative.
This is a multifaceted issue.
Yeah.
And it goes back to, I think, the core of what government is supposed to provide. And when we survey the people in Wood County, public safety is number one.
Right.
When you walk out your door, you want to know that you're safe. 2 is development of infrastructure, both highways and communication. Extremely important. There is the thought at the state level that we are going to increase no tax. We're going to have no new spending. In the transportation arena, gas tax revenues have actually decreased over the last 10 years because of more fuel-efficient cars. That's not a bad thing. The fact of the matter is most of those dollars end up in the southeast corner of the state. That's not a tough one to figure out. Most of the representatives in the state, based on population, are out of that part of the state. But we certainly need to recognize the fact that, if nothing else, we absolutely need to maintain what we have. And we were on schedules where we couldn't do maintenance for 30 or 40 years because of limited dollars on some of this. In Wood County, a few years ago, we started bonding $5 million a year for road improvements within Wood County. Philosophically, that was not an easy decision. People often said, well, why don't you save the money up and then spend it? The philosophy in Wood County has been the money is better left in your pocket as the taxpayer rather than in my pocket as a savings account, because you know what happens with government savings accounts? The money never gets spent where it's supposed to get spent.
Yeah. Oh, there's a pocket of money here.
Yep. So we leave it there till, in your pocket till we absolutely need it. And in Wood County, we decided a few years ago that we needed to do this or we would be faced with much greater costs. It's much cheaper to fix or repair than to replace. And those costs can be in excess of $1 million a mile. So it gets pretty expensive pretty quick. I also sit on the Local Government Institute Board of Directors, and a couple of years ago we put out a report called Filling Potholes. It gave the legislature an easy way out, a nonpartisan or bipartisan effort, 14 different recommendations on how they could solve the highway funding issue. Some of the legislators read it, some of them didn't. Now there's a Just Fix It campaign out across the state by the transportation developers. You are going to have to see something done. I think the thought process behind all of these is every one of those legislators is afraid to raise taxes.
Right.
And the result of these reports and these local efforts, in my opinion, is to A, bring awareness, and 2, to provide political cover for those people when they have those votes. The bigger issue, though, is the underlying one, and that is, there's a limited number of tax dollars available for everything that we do in the state of Wisconsin and at the local government.
Well, it's prioritizing.
Prioritize it. And the fact of the matter is we've had exponential expansion in some areas that don't provide for public safety or for infrastructure development. Some of the programs that have been developed over time in other areas have just exploded. And until we get a control of that, till we realize what the function of government really is, you will never have enough dollars. So I think they're trying to get their arms around that. I think in a bipartisan approach, though, you cannot continue to borrow against the future generations to make repairs. You're going to have to at some point bite the bullet to some extent, or you're going to have to cut some programs. And that's what I've always talked about. Let's take a real hard look at those entitlement programs, see where those dollars are spent, and see if we can't reallocate those.
Well, that's been the governor's argument. I don't want to incur unless there's another cut somewhere else. Scott Krug, when we were talking about this, he gave the example of a growing business. At some point, your business grows to a point where you have to invest in additional computers, additional machinery, additional employees, and you may have to raise your prices to cover that, but that's because you're a growing business. His argument was the economy of the state of Wisconsin is growing. We need to now to make, and we're in a better financial state, so now we need to make some investments to help sustain that growth.
They've even done, Carl, some really good studies on what the damage to cars, total in suspension damage and other damage due to the condition of the roads in some of the places. It absolutely needs to be addressed. I can't argue with the governor in the respect that I think there's probably dollars that could be shuffled, but again, that's a quid pro quo. It's a trade-off. It
doesn't solve the long-term problem.
Yeah, you take it from A, take from A to get to B. And the report, the Filling Potholes report, and sometime I should bring it and put it in front of me, but I don't think there'll be a single solution.
No,
I think it's going to be multifaceted in how we solve this. And it might involve open road tolling. It might involve vehicle miles traveled, although that's not particularly appetizing to those of us in northern Wisconsin who travel great distances to work. Might be additional vehicle license taxes in places. But I think if you took all of those different possibilities and put them together in a program, you wouldn't hit any particular part of the population extremely hard, and you could probably solve the issue.
Okay.
I can tell you this: the governor and the Secretary of Transportation were directly at odds, and that doesn't mean that people can't be at odds and still you can disagree agreeably.
Right,
but there was a difference in philosophy, and I think that thought process that something needs to be done with the transportation system, the roads, will happen. Okay. Well, because that plays a big role in economic development, and we're talking. And one of your concerns that you have brought is the broadband issue and getting Wi-Fi, the internet, out to the rural areas. Because when business people travel, they have their smartphone with them, or they have their tablet or their mini laptop, and they want to be able to connect with the home office or whatever. And that is a crucial issue when you're talking about future economic growth. Absolutely tied in. Number one in economic development. It's that old attitude or philosophy, if you build it, they will come. If it's here, they'll come. We need better roads. Everybody sees that. Two of the things that I did as the WCA president were really push the road issue, and maybe more importantly, the build out of broadband accessibility across the state. It is frustrating to me when I drive down even state highways in my own county, state highways, 4-lane trunks, where I lose cell phone coverage. Yeah. And if you don't have cell phone coverage, you certainly don't have fast enough internet to probably support those businesses that would work remotely. In today's world, you do not have to travel into that brick and mortar glass tower in the city. You can do it from your summer home or your cabin or where you're on vacation. But we do not have that build out across the state capable of supporting those speeds that we need to facilitate that. And that doesn't just go to business development, it goes to education too. We live in a beautiful state. We have every natural resource that you can imagine. People love coming up here on vacation. We'd like to keep them up here. And the only way to do that is to be cognizant of those issues and to make sure we have that build out. And that, in some cases, will probably take public-private partnerships. When you get into a an area that's rural enough, you don't have the population density to maybe support the infrastructure going in from just a cash flow basis as a private enterprise. That's the place where government probably has to step in. And I'm real reluctant to say that all the time.
Well,
I think we need to provide the ability for them to do that. It has to happen.
We did that with rural electrification in our nation's history. We said we got to get electricity out to the farms, and I mean it was all part of the modernization of the economy back then. This is the same thing basically? It's just different technology.
Yeah, it's a different world, and we need to go that way. If I can, I'm going to transition.
Sure, go ahead.
Segue here real quickly. The other day, and this is along those same lines. The other day, I got a call about 6 o'clock in the morning that said power is out at the courthouse.
I was going to ask you about that.
And emergency generation immediately kicked in, and then the emergency generator at some point failed because a cooling line broke along the way at some point. It shut it down in a self-protection mode. We were without power. If you are without power at the courthouse, that means you have no 911 capability, no communication, no computers.
I got my Nixle alert because of that.
Yeah, and exactly. And we have no way to communicate. That can lead to tragedy. Mm-hmm. So obviously we're looking at building in more redundancy. But where this comes into play is we have a courthouse that's 60 years old. A number of the systems, the wiring and other things in that courthouse, plumbing, are also 60 years old. At some point, they begin to fail. And this is that philosophy with tax dollars. We typically don't go out and say we're going to tax at the limit because we want your dollars because we may do something with it someday. When we did the purchase of the River Block building, that was to get into a newer facility, to be able to move some offices around and to do some of those upgrades and repairs that we need to do. More importantly, we need to have a workaround when a situation like this happens. This happened to be, I don't actually know what caused the power outage.
There were thunderstorms early that morning.
Yeah, and I'm not aware of, we know exactly what caused that. I know what caused the generator to go down, and we're going to build in additional redundancy there. But Carl touched on it. There's got to be a way for the public to be notified immediately that there's an issue and a workaround to that. And Nixle is the way to do that. And Carl probably has the details how to get that in. If he doesn't, I actually printed it to bring it with me today.
Well, good. Why don't you give it?
But I left it on my desk. So as soon as
you just go to NIXLE.
I think, yeah. And anyway, I'm going to get it over to Carl so he can read it as a public service message.
Sure. It's real easy. You just go to Nixle and just Google that and give your location or your zip code, and you're signed up, and you'll get. And you don't have to have a smartphone. Any phone that can get a text. Yep. You'll get a text, and your phone will go off, and you'll get a text message, and it'll say, like that day, it says 911 in Wood County down.
And the real important part of this, and Carl, you guys were greatly helpful on this. When I was notified by dispatch, I said, can we get a Nixle message out? We did not even have that capability at the time. So when you talk about mutual aid or cooperation, we immediately got a hold of Wisconsin Rapids and had them use their system to get the Nixle message out.
Right.
Extremely important. We got a hold of the radio station over here, and they were on it immediately, informing the public as to what the issue was. We're going to be able to, with those Nixle messages, put in alternate numbers that you could call where we could respond to those emergency calls. We'd certainly appreciate that when we are in those situations that you don't call to get your cat out of the tree. Or
make sure it's an emergency.
True emergencies. We'll have that. How to access that is on the Wood County Dispatch Facebook page. We're also going to have it on the Wood County website here, so you can figure out how to do that if you just don't directly Google it. And I will actually forward over a copy of that to you too, Carl. So
and I'll put it on over the back fence and everything else, and we'll make sure to get the word out. But it's real easy to use. I don't care what kind of a cell phone you have. If all cell phones can get text, and you'll get a little 3-line statement of whatever. It could be a weather emergency. It could be a major traffic problem somewhere. And it'll just tell you, and then you can go, okay, I'm going to stay away from that area.
Yeah, and it gets really interesting, when you talk about money being spent by government. We don't like to spend it. I try to treat it as if it was my own savings account.
Sure.
But there's a lot of silos out there, especially in communications. And we might have a Solaris-based system. There might be Verizon somewhere else or Frontier, and they don't always talk to each other real well or are able to switch back and forth. So sometimes when we have an emergency, you'd think it would be a real simple fix to be able to just switch over to a different system. It doesn't happen that way, but I can tell you that the IT departments at all of those different governmental entities and agencies are working on that to try to bring all of that together to have some standardized method where we can work together. But it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen for free.
No.
And in this digital world we live in, people expect stuff instantly. I am constantly amazed when I get a phone call and they say, I texted you or emailed you 5 minutes ago and you didn't get back to me. I mean,
I've had that too. Let's see, I was driving or I was on the air for the past 3 hours.
and I get that too. Or, you're in a building that, in effect, is a radio-free zone. We have some areas where I can't get texts, I can't get emails, I can't get
Okay, I've been on those. Yeah, I'll check my phone and go, what's this?
and it just happens. And I guess, you go back half a generation, there was no such thing.
No.
And you got a letter in the mail, you answered it a couple of days later. I think sometimes the demands are unreasonable as to how quick you get back. And then from a productivity standpoint, I tend to check my emails in the morning and messages. I tend to try to stay away from them till about noon, lunchtime, and then again at the end of the day, because if you're checking them every 5 minutes, nothing ever gets accomplished. And most of what you receive isn't real important. I mean, if I get something that comes in as an emergency from a judge or human services or public safety, obviously you answer those. But I'm just amazed at the people that will call and say, I called you at 9, it's now 9:30, and I haven't heard back yet. There's typically a reason. We make every effort to get back to you as quickly as we can.
This commentary about our modern society, it was a great ball game at Witter Field last night with the Rafters, and they won 2-1, but there were young people around me with their smartphones. They weren't even watching the game. They were going through their touch screens on their Facebook or whatever, and I'm just going, really? Plus, they're sitting in an area where foul balls could land.
And we've, I've been pushed in that. Obviously, use a smartphone. I do all those things. I'm computer literate to some extent.
Yeah.
But when we get into the part of the problem, the other day when the power went down, all of our systems went down, and those should be rebooted in a certain order when those servers come back on.
Just like here,
but they didn't. We just turned the switch back on. A lot of those hadn't been off probably for 30 or 40 years. So we have to work through those issues. I get dragged kicking and screaming into that next generation of technology, and usually my answer is, as I'm getting explained that this server doesn't talk to that server or this way, I said, when I press the green button, does the printer go on? That's about as deep a knowledge as I really need to have.
If I hit send, will it work?
Yes.
Okay. Well, a very interesting discussion. And again, folks, when you hear the stuff, what's happening at the water ski show area at Lake Wasatch at Red Sands, the lake isn't being shut down because of the aqua ski. We're trying to accommodate the aqua skiers. It's a huge year for them.
And they're trying to be accommodated for about a couple of hours, a few nights a week. I would encourage those people in the community, though, if you've traveled down to Tommy Bartlett's or you've been to SeaWorld,
check out their
Wednesdays and Sundays, you're going to get to see a show that is much more complicated with many more members skiing than you would see there, and you get to see it for free.
Yeah, in a beautiful setting. So, okay, with that, Lance, I'll let you get back to work. I appreciate the update. We'll do it again next month.
Thanks, Carl. Appreciate it.
Wood County Board Chairman Lance Pliml wrapping up part 1 of today's Morning Magazine here on AM 1320 and WFHR.com and also on RCCA Media. And as always, the Morning Magazine is brought to you by Comfort Air.